Hi, my name is Mike and I'm here to read a comic. And today's comic is Teen Titans, issue number 21, dated June 1969. This issue was an interesting read, to say the least. It wasn't always an enjoyable read. I think there are a lot of problems with the storytelling here. And although the comics credits aren't listed, I do know that Neil Adams was a part of the art team. And sorry Neil, you helped a little bit, but not as much as you should have, because it's just really just not a well laid out story. In terms of the story it's trying to tell, it's kind of interesting. It's clearly a Marvel style story. So this is like one of the, I think, earliest attempts by DC to sort of imitate the Marvel style. But as I was reading it, they clearly did not fully understand the Marvel style, and it kind of shows. I would kind of liken the effort to I guess cargo cults, where these cargo cults, they understand the visual concepts, but they don't understand the complete context or the whole context. And that's what I got here. I kind of see basically kind of a forced effort to kind of to imitate Marvel here. But nevertheless, there were a few things I did enjoy about this comic. One of them was the guest stars, which is the Hawk and the Dove. These were fairly newly created characters at the time. I believe they were created by Steve Ditko, and I think Steve Ditko just sort of wanted to use them as kind of a vehicle to, I guess, explore his kind of like his Ayn Rand philosophy, and it also sort of was sort of a way of trying for DC to try to reach out to the kind of, guess, college market, because the Hawk and the Dove, it was very reflective of the times and the split between the country over the Vietnam War and a few other things. The cover looks like a Nick Cardy cover. The events on the cover do display in the internal pages of the comic, but the cover itself is not very meaningful in terms of what's going on. We see Speedy and Hawk, and they're both grabbing Wonder Girl. And basically this looks like a high school prom, where these two guys are fighting over who's going to dance with Wonder Girl. In the background, we see Robin and Kid Flash, and they're facing off against the Dove. So I'm going to go into the comic. Now, before I start with the story, I'm going to look at this one ad, and it's from the Presidential Physical Fitness Award. I do remember this program, although it was toward the end of the program in the late 70s. My guess is that this program was started for a couple of reasons. One, the powers that be at the time kind of noticed that kids were getting a little fat and a little inactive, so I guess they wanted to improve the health of the future workforce. And I think a second reason why the government started this was that the Black Panthers had started a successful breakfast program where back then the schools really just provided lunch, but they didn't really provide breakfast, and this was clearly something that was sorely needed. And the Black Panthers were very successful at this. And I think breakfast programs in schools was a part of this program. So they also may have wanted to compete with the Black Panthers. We see some kids here. Some of them are in DC costumes. We see Robin, Superman, Supergirl, Superdog, Tarzan. We see East Indian characters out of like a Rudyard Kipling novel on an elephant. Probably a little stereotypical. So yeah, that's about what's going on. Okay, so I'm going to go into the story. The story is Citadel of Fear. The events of the previous issue do follow in this issue, so that's one way where DC was trying to capture the Marvel style, because usually DC comics at this time were kind of like done in one issues, where the entire story, everything is resolved in the one issue, and anything that happened in the previous issue really doesn't follow into the future issues. This is a Puppet Master story. So most of the villains that we're focused on in this issue actually are no import to the overall story. There's sort of a puppet master in another dimension who is controlling these figures here. Okay, so I'm going to start. It starts at a transporter. This is mid-action. So if you didn't read the previous issue, you kind of have to figure out what's going on through osmosis. And I didn't read the previous issue. We see kind of a middle-aged man. He kind of looks like a maintenance worker or factory worker, and he's running into this transporter beam. And following behind him are 4 members of the Teen Titans: Wonder Girl, Speedy, Kid Flash, and Robin. And their pursuit of this individual has been stopped because suddenly, out of seemingly thin air, Hawk and Dove, who were a new superhero duo at the time, they show up. So they trip up the Teen Titans. So kind of like, a play on the misunderstanding thing here. And the villain is allowed to escape. We see here that the Teen Titans, they're not particularly happy about this. They lash out. Speedy does kind of the punk move. He immediately goes after the weakest member, Dove, and he belts him with a right hand. So, he wanted to show he's a tough guy, but he picked the wimpiest superhero around. Then it turns out that Hawk, who is Dove's older brother, he doesn't like this, so he immediately connects with the left on Speedy here. Some of this art does kind of look like, at least the layouts look like Neil Adams here. Hawk is not impressed with Speedy, and I have to agree, I was not impressed with Speedy that much in this issue. Hawk is saying, listen, he calls him a pint-sized Robin Hood, and says, you want to take on someone who's tough and well-dressed? Me, the Hawk. So anyway, Hawk, and I mentioned that because Hawk makes a point about, these being brats in snappy long johns. So he who has kind of a lame costume is kind of making fun of the other guys. Robin notes that this is Hawk and Dove, and he knows that they're wanted by the police. Robin does pull a nice little wrestling move here when he slams Hawk to the ground. Back first. However, Robin is immediately caught in the grasp of Dove, and Dove says that he does want to talk things out. The problem is that Dove is kind of currently choking Robin, so Robin isn't going to be that receptive to talking it out with someone who, basically is trying to strangle him. However, Hawk sees the situation slightly differently than Dove, where Dove wants to talk things out. Hawk just wants to belt Robin at this point. And however, Robin, who has some moves of his own, he immediately uses a couple of defense moves against Dove, and he's out of Dove's grasp. And we see Hawk dives for Robin. And Hawk is telling Robin that he made a bad mistake, baby. So one of the things I did notice is that there was an attempt to sort of make the dialogue a bit more contemporary and to put a little bit more juice in it. So the dialogue in this book isn't as stilted as some of the other DC comics that were coming out at the time. But at the same time, I don't think they necessarily captured the kind of the snappy dialogue that you'd get from Marvel Comics. So anyway, Dove is kind of holding his ribs here. Speedy, again, going after the wimpy guy. He doesn't really hit Dove directly, but he hits Dove with some psychedelic arrows. So apparently Dove right now is going through this unwanted LSD trip. Meanwhile, it should be noted that Speedy has psychedelic arrows. And I'm kind of wondering, maybe he was kind of using those arrows prior to trying out heroin. And maybe this is what was the start of him being all screwed up in Green Lantern, Green Arrow 85 and 86. However, I should mention that there are two other members of the Teen Titans who are not figuring in this fight, and that's Wonder Girl and Kid Flash, who are the two more powerful members of the four. It turns out that Wonder Girl is still somewhat dazed by what's going on, because honestly, Wonder Girl could end this fight very quickly. And it turns out they are in a warehouse, I should mention. And some of the large cargo boxes, the wooden boxes that carry crates, I should say, wooden crates. One of them is about to fall directly on Wonder Girl. Wonder Girl at this point, she has a full-blown concussion. However, Hawk sees this, and the gentleman superhero, he rushes in and he grabs Wonder Girl just before the crate crashes to the ground. And Hawk is kind of taking advantage of the situation. He has a beautiful young girl. He has her in her arms, and he's quite smitten with her, and he's really laying on the Romeo shtick pretty hard here. And it turns out that Hawk is very reluctant to let go of Wonder Girl as she's in his arms. This part does work itself out. As for the next few panels, it's basically Wonder Girl being held by this guy. So Hawk wants to hold Wonder Girl because he's looking for a date. Dove is saying no, hold her because she might be a useful hostage. If we need a human shield, you have one right in your hands, Hawk. So just because you're a Dove doesn't mean you're not a Weasley little wimp like this guy. However, Speedy calls out Hawk, wanting him to let Wonder Girl down right now, and now they can kind of talk things out. And Hawk and Speedy are kind of getting at it. They're kind of verbally disagreeing with one another. Speedy's weird in that he gets angry with Hawk, but he hits Dove. So Speedy's kind of like, listen, I might show your brother something if you don't shut your mouth. However, it's Robin who says, listen, you guys need to stop doing this, and we do need to talk things out. So again, kind of like the Marvel thing, they're creating a little conflict here. And it's also a little bit of romantic conflict here. Because it seems like Speedy's kind of being very protective of Wonder Girl. More than, she's just a teammate of his. Hawk is making it clear why he's holding Wonder Girl. Okay, so before I get back to the story, take a look at this one ad. It's for race cars. I was never a big car kid. And but I do find it interesting here that not only do you get the car, you get an employee. And the employees that are being offered are, you get the signal man, or you can get the fireman, or the mechanic, or the attendant. It looks like a car attendant. It doesn't look like he's the guy who kind of cleans up the urinals. You get a track man, who basically looks like a guy shoveling gravel, and you get the flag man, who looks like Matter Eater Lad, but with a flag. So that's kind of interesting. All right, so yeah. Also look at this in-house ad. It's a full-page ad for this one comic. It's for showcase. It looks like a sword and sorcery tale. This is pre-Conan, but I remember the comic book companies, particularly DC, would try to dabble with sword and sorcery comic books, because I know they recognized there was a market for these pulp fantasies, and comics would seem like a natural medium. But until Conan, the comic book companies really didn't fully understand how to bring these to life. This is Nightmaster. I don't believe Nightmaster went anywhere. So, but it's a nice cover drawn by Joe Kubert, though. Okay, gonna go back to the story. Finally, Kid Flash shows up. And he's kind of looking at the transporter device. Apparently what's going on is that there's a smuggling ring. And it looks like the Teen Titans and Hawk and Dove were both targeting this smuggling ring independently of each other. So it's only at this point, they kind of make their existence known. But it seems like both teams know a lot about this smuggling ring, and they both want to stop it. So anyway, Kid Flash, he's looking over the transporter technology, because remember the agent that they were following was successfully transported out. And Speedy suggests that they split up into two groups, and they'll go to one destination each. Wonder Girl's kind of saying, hey guy, you can kind of let me down now. And Hawk says, yeah, I'll do so in a moment, after me and my brother and you go into the transporter first. So at this point, Hawk has chosen independently what the two teams are. So we have Hawk, Dove, and Wonder Girl going in. The other three guys, they're kind of standing there with their dicks in their hands. Robin's kind of noting, listen, hey, we'll get him the next time. Speedy says he's going to really settle things with Hawk. He's going to put a beat down on Dove, and he's going to step all over Dove, and that is his way of teaching Hawk a lesson. And Kid Flash is saying, listen, Speedy, kind of cool it there. I don't know. There might be a little sarcasm there. And he's saying, listen, it doesn't matter. The teams have already split up. It's 3 to each team. We'll live with it and kind of deal with it later on. So it turns out, now this doesn't make sense. As these three guys are talking, we see a look of Dove's ass here as it's going through the transporter. But in the previous panel, it kind of looks like they already transported. So this is what I mean. This comic is not very well laid out. I didn't talk about the creative team because I actually don't see credits for the creative team. Obviously, I know Neil Adams was involved with this, and I could see his work in some of the layouts. I'm guessing probably Nick Cardy was probably involved, and the writer, I guess maybe Steve Skeets. I'm not sure. Anyway, so it turns out Hawk, Dove, and Wonder Girl, they arrive at Istanbul. And it kind of looks like they arrived at a well-guarded place, because we see gunmen in Turkish fezzes, and they're armed with machine guns, or at least automatic weapons. And then we see that Hawk immediately goes into action along with Wonder Girl. They take care of these armed guards pretty easily. Dove is complaining that maybe they could have figured out a more non-violent way of handling that situation. And Hawk is telling him, look, quit belly aching. They were looking for trouble and we gave it to them. So just kind of like shut up. And I kind of have to agree with Hawk here. These are not the guys to negotiate. I'm not quite sure what Dove had in mind. But honestly, this kind of beat down by Hawk and Wonder Girl, that's what they needed to do. So it turns out that the leaders of the smuggling ring are watching the proceedings from their televised monitors here. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this is a puppet master story. So these guys actually aren't really important to the overall story because they're being controlled. It turns out the control is somewhat selective. Now, outside of this alien presence controlling them, they do have reason to not like these superheroes. So it turns out the puppet master kind of picks and chooses his moments on when he controls the strings. So at this point, this is the leaders of the smuggling ring. And it turns out they didn't know that Hawk and Dove was onto their smuggling ring. But one of the guys, it looks like the concierge, kind of figures out that their bumbling will probably help us. And the head of the ring says, listen, we'll be somewhat grateful to these guys for being just huge screw-ups because they might have really helped us here. It turns out that one of the second in command, I think his name is NG3, or he's another agent, NG3. That's all we hear. We see the head of the smuggling ring. He's playing chess here, so it's kind of like a visual thing. Okay, so the three heroes are, I should say, Wonder Girl, Hawk, and Dove. They're walking through the corridor here, and because this is Istanbul, this is kind of like a Turkish palace. And Turkish palaces, they have these long, beautiful columns, and it turns out these columns that the three of them are kind of admiring. No, they're noticing that they're getting closer and closer and closer, kind of like that scene in the garbage disposal unit in Star Wars. So at this point, they realize that they're in a trap because the columns are coming closer together, and they're also getting closer physically to the hero. So at this point, it looks like they're going to be crushed. Wonder Girl, who's obviously the strongest of the three, she's not having actually much luck pushing back these columns. Hawk and Dove are having trouble with it too. Hawk suggests that maybe Dove, can kind of squeeze through it because, he has that kind of slender, frail body that, all doves have. But it turns out that Dove can't go through the columns. So he can't squeeze out of the columns. Although I'm not sure that, outside of Dove, I'm not sure how it would have helped the other two. Then we see what looks to be kind of like one of the columns developing a face. So this looks like some type of robotic device. Again, honestly, it's not very well drawn. And that's something I never thought I would say about anything involving Neil Adams. But anyway, it turns out this large metallic device is firing a type of sleeping gas. So Wonder Girl, Hawk, and Dove, they're currently incapacitated. And the leader of the smuggling ring is quite happy with Agent NG3. So then we go to part 2 of the Citadel of Fear. And this is the second team. And they're going through the transporter. I'm not quite sure they should have done this because they don't know anything about this technology. Nevertheless, it worked out for them. We see Robin, Kid Flash, and Speedy. And they are arriving in Berlin. So while the other three are in Istanbul, they're in Berlin at this point. And according to Robin, it looks like they're in an old air raid shelter. So this is obviously something that was built during the Second World War. And right now, they can just simply explore because they have no other clue what else is going on. So they're just gonna kind of walk around and hope that they can find something useful. It turns out the leaders of the smuggling ring, they're watching the three heroes, and they're prepared to spring a trap on the three Teen Titans. and immediately they're opened fire on. And this is kind of a nice little layout here. I think this is by Adams. I think Nick Cardy kind of may have finished it. Nick Cardy is a great artist, but I don't think he works well with Adams. And that's assuming that this is Nick Cardy. So anyway, Robin, Kid Flash, and Speedy, they're being opened fire on here. Now, before I go back to the story, another full-page ad, but it's only promoting one comic. And it's Superboy's 20th anniversary issue. And this is issue number 156. It just looks like a couple of reprints. So they're selling this as this spectacular 20th anniversary moment, but they're only giving the reader just a couple of crappy reprints. So they're not even getting new material. So a little false advertising there. So it turns out the firing that's coming at the Teen Titans is coming from sort of a freight train. It's definitely on tracks, and there are at least 6 well-armed men here. So it looks like they're firing. It looks to be somewhat futuristic weapons. Again, nice little panel here, particularly of Robin, kind of doing this Hank McCoy Beast-like move, as he kind of dodges some of this fire by kind of flipping on this this girder here. However, the Teen Titans realize that they're cornered at this point, because there's really no going forward unless they go forward through these guys. Kid Flash looks like he's injured, so that's kind of the excuse given for why this very powerful guy would be somewhat ineffective against these henchmen. Speedy's kind of just dodging for his life at this point. Kid Flash, he uses his arm to create an instant hurricane effect, and this is able to incapacitate at least 2 of the henchmen here. So Kid Flash knocked out 2 guys. Speedy, he goes directly to his bow and arrow, and because of the great accuracy that he has, he's able to disarm 2 other henchmen here pretty easily. Then it turns out Robin handles the other 2. And this is the description of Robin we are given. And finally, the spring steel muscles of the most superbly trained young athlete of our day goes into action. I don't think anyone should ever describe Robin in those terms. But nevertheless, he is effective, so, And the rest of the henchmen run off. So they leave this vehicle here, and they notice that the henchmen are running off. However, the henchmen don't go very far until a large glass panel door is sprung. So the Teen Titans and the henchmen, they're separated by this kind of clear glass pane that's separating them. So it kind of sort of looks like the Teen Titans are, quote, trapped. However, the Teen Titans don't feel trapped, because they're like, we can get out of this. Speedy is like saying, listen, this is a joke, just a couple of my concussion arrows, and we're going to have that glass smashed in a minute. Kid Flash is like, listen, I can vibrate through that glass. We don't have to destroy it. I can just vibrate it through. We're out. Robin is saying, I could get out too, but, I'm not going to explain how. But, I could get out just as much as you could. So Rob's kind of playing it off here. However, Kid Flash, he's a little more wary of the events, saying that, listen, these guys may not be as lame as they look, because we might be overlooking something. And it turns out they do. And here's some very interesting panels. The train engine vehicle that the henchman came on has basically transformed itself. So it's kind of like a transformer. And it's sort of like this metallic spider-like device. Now this is sort of when the comic goes a little off the rails here. I'm guessing at this point, the previous pages, they were drawn and they were kind of lettered. The editor looked at it and said, this isn't Marvel enough. You're not doing as much Marvel as we want. This may have been Dick G. Giordano. So this is where the comic really kind of starts to marvel up. Speedy is saying, holy crippled cockroaches. Dig that crazy whacked out spider. Man. So this is sort of, and there's a couple of callbacks to, this being a spider and somehow working the man word after. So I'm guessing that the guys, when they were told to copy Marvel style, they must have been given Spider-Man comic books. And I'm thinking this is a little bit of passive aggression from the creative team because they're kind of forcing them out of their comfort element. And not only that, is that they don't know the element that they're going into. So this is sort of this weird attempt by DC to kind of ape Marvel. And Robin's kind of assessing the situation from a strategic point of view, saying, calling out the irony of using the transportation as actually the means of destroying them. Kid Flash is noticing that this robotic entity is giving off like electrical charges. So he's immediately recognizing the danger. Speedy thinks he has something in his quiver that would fix this. So he fires an arrow here. I'm not quite sure what type of arrow he's firing, but it doesn't work. An electrical charge immediately hits him. And, oh man, it hits him hard. He looks so funny here. Kid Flash is thinking that, maybe he can vibrate out of here. And really, dude? I mean, you're going to abandon your teammates like that? But nevertheless, Robin says, listen, don't try it. He calls him Flasher for some reason. I think at some point they decided to call Kid Flash Flasher for no good reason, and it makes no sense because during the narrative of the comic he's still referred to as Kid Flash. So this is why I think that they kind of really started yelling at the guys. They needed to make this issue more Marvel-like. We see Robin. He's caught in the coils. Excuse me. So, I should mention Kid Flash. After he tried to run out on his teammates, he was actually hit with an electrical charge. And Robin here is hit with some electrical coils. This is definitely kind of a Neil Adams layout, but it's definitely not, it's not finished by Neil Adams. Turns out the head of the smuggling ring, they see that the three members of the Teen Titans, they're all unconscious. They're quite happy. They want to get rid of these guys. They're kind of like interfering with their organization's business. And the head of the smuggling ring is saying, Agent NG3, just whack these guys. So basically, they're just telling NG3, who had kind of organized this attack, that he can kill these members of the Teen Titans and it won't be a problem for the smuggling ring. However, the head of the smuggling ring, his order is stopped immediately because it turns out that one of the chess pieces that he has in front of him, a rook, is actually a transmitter. And basically what we find is that the actual guy who's controlling the events and controlling the leaders of the smuggling ring, they're issuing their orders. So this is sort of the selective hypnosis when they're only hypnotized when the puppet master, needs to actually interact with them. So anyway, it tells them, listen, that they're going to counter command that order. These guys aren't going to be killed. However, I only need 2 of the members. I need Robin and I need Kid Flash, and I don't need Speedy. My guess is that maybe he kind of saw some of Speedy's habits, figured, hey, listen, I don't want to deal with this guy and his cold turkey issues. Should he, be missing certain products? So, just send those 2 guys and just leave the other. So anyway, and before I go back to the story, you can take a look at another in-house ad. It's for Adam Strange. I never really cared much for Adam Strange, because I just really disliked that costume of his, and I wasn't really into those space adventures. But this cover is drawn by Neil Adams, so it does look quite good. Okay, going to go to chapter 3 of this story. This is sort of when some of the dialogue becomes a little bit more fun. So anyway, it turns out the henchmen who are on the other side of the glass pane, the pane lifts up. They grab Robin and Kid Flash. They leave Speedy there. They're not concerned about Speedy because the robot, the spider robot, is still there watching over him. It turns out that Hawk, Dove, and Wonder Girl, they were taken to kind of this dungeon, which would kind of make sense. They're kind of like in this old Istanbul temple, for lack of a better word. And it looks like Hawk and Dove, they're slamming against the door. Their hands are bound behind their back along with Dove. They're trying to get the door open. It doesn't look like it's working. Dove is admonishing the 2, saying that they're basically wasting their time and energy. And saying that even if you broke the door down, our hands are still bound. So, what good are you doing? Here's some nice little dialogue. Hawk says, "You blow a lot of wind for a guy who's doing nothing but keeping the floor warm." Wonder Girl says that, listen, Hawk sounds right. Maybe if you weren't such a whiny bitch sitting on the floor, we can get something done here. Dove answers back, "Oh, the blue-eyed princess says Hawk's right, so it must be so." And again, I thought this was good dialogue. This dialogue worked in terms of kind of like, this is actually kind of like actually a little edgier than what you would normally read in a Marvel comic. However, Dove did figure out one thing while he was keeping the floor warm, was that the cuffs, the cuffs that are binding them, they're made of some type of plastic. And it turns out that if they just simply stretch, the cuffs, something which they kind of should have figured out much earlier intuitively, they could get out of them. So basically, they kind of, this is kind of a lame way of breaking through these cuffs. But nevertheless, by the next panel, they're out of the cuffs. We're looking at Dove's ass here for some reason. And he's using the word crack, a crack, large enough for us to stuff our plastic handcuffs. Like, Dove, what are you thinking? So anyway, it turns out that Dove actually is thinking. He does have a plan. And it turns out the cuffs that they had broken out of are highly flammable. And what they do is that they take the cuffs, the plastic cuffs, they stuff them into the lock of the door, and Wonder Girl uses her bracelets to create a spark. And this spark ignites the fibrous handcuffs, because again, the material is explosive and flammable. And it turns out they break out of the door cell. We see a quick moment later where they meet the guards that they had beaten up earlier. And those guards are kind of protecting the transporter. And it looks like there was a fight. It looks like Hawk and Wonder Girl took care of business. It was done off panel. So again, this was not really a well laid out story. Dove says that he believes he should rethink his ideas on the value of violence. So Dove is kind of coming around. Hey, sometimes you kind of need to kick ass. That's kind of a lesson that should be intuitive to anyone who's a part of a superhero team. If you're in a superhero team, kicking ass is something you kind of have to do. So the three go through the transporter. And again, it's kind of wordless balloons here. And it turns out that Hawk, Dove, and Wonder Girl, rather than going back to that warehouse where they started, they actually go to Berlin. I guess it kind of sort of makes sense in that the last time the transporter was used, it was pointed toward Berlin. So I'm guessing kind of the defaults aren't reset after it's used. So anyway, nevertheless, very convenient of Hawk, Dove, and Wonder Girl to be here to help their teammates. However, the teammate that they're currently in front of is Speedy. Speedy's on the other side of the glass pane. He's being guarded by this giant, spider robot here. So Speedy can't really do much because anytime he tries to move a little, he gets electrical shocked. Dove notes that there's kind of a control box on top of this mechanical spider, and he kind of guesses that this is probably the brain of the robot, and if they kind of knock that out, perhaps they can kind of knock the robot out. It turns out that the large glass pane, it does have a ceiling, so it doesn't fully go up to the top. So Dove and Wonder Girl, they're able to climb up this glass pane to encounter the robot. Hawk doesn't want anything to do with this, and he's making the claim that listen, there's not enough room, and I kind of trust you guys to handle it, which tells me that Hawk doesn't really trust those guys. And he's kind of saying, I'm not going to put my faith in either one of you. So you just kind of stay up there, and I'll see how things play out. That seems to be what Hawk's doing. Oofa. Okay, before I go back to the story, kind of take a look at this ad. I'm going to take a look at the Palisades Park one. I always found it amusing that such a regional business would be advertising in comic books that were sold nationally. Palisades Park, the amusement park no longer exists. There is a plaque to it. I do go to Palisades Park, New Jersey, fairly regularly because there's a great spa there called King Spa, and at least once a month I try to get there. Apparently, if you have a DC comic, you can get a free ride on either the Batman slider and the carousel, and you get free parking with admission. And this coupon is worth $1.10. So hey, you buy your $12 comic, and you get something of $1.10 of value in Palisades Park. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the story. Hawk and Wonder Girl, they're trying to take care of the control box on the mechanical spider. Wonder Girl's using her lasso. So she already has it, she has it caught. She's just simply pulling it at this point. And she pulls and pulls, and she ends up destroying the control box. And it turns out that was the mechanical brain for this robot. However, when the mechanical brain shut down, the entire robot shut down, which meant that the things that were keeping the robot standing are suddenly, toppling over. and the giant mechanical device topples right over Speedy. One of the things I noticed here is that we're looking at Speedy, but for some reason he has Robin's head. I don't know what happened during the creative process, but maybe they decided that it was going to be Robin who was going to be left with the mechanical spider and not Speedy. They might have changed it late at some point, but during the corrections, they might have missed this one page. So this is kind of the creators kind of telling on themselves here. So the original story might have had Robin, and he actually looks like he's drawn like Robin. And we see the mechanical spider. They collapses right on top of Speedy. It's basically crushing his spine at this point. He's kind of pinned to the ground here. And Hawk and Dove, they kind of go into action here. And what they do is that they kind of squirm under the mechanical leg that is pressing down on Speedy here. And they're both going to use their strength to lift up this heavy mechanical device. And it turns out that Hawk and Dove, one of the things that they have, based on osmosis from what I read, is that when the two are in unison, their powers increase exponentially. So Hawk and Dove, by nature, are at odds. But in those situations where they're both in 100% agreement, they're able to kind of access this power that will increase exponentially, and which is kind of helpful in a superhero situation, and definitely in a rescue situation, because they both want to get Speedy out. I mean, Hawk has his issues with Speedy, but they're not like, I want to murk you issues. And it turns out the two are able to successfully lift this mechanical arm to the point where Speedy can kind of like, crawl out from under. Again, not the greatest laid out panel here. And then Hawk and Dove, they immediately get out from under the mechanical arm. They both barely escape it coming down on them. Hawk uses the word sheesh. Sheesh is something that regularly appeared in 1960s Marvel Comics. And then we have Hawk here saying, "First time I was almost buried by a spider, man." And again, the callback to Spider-Man. And my guess is that the guys who are kind of writing this book and creating this book, they weren't happy with this edict to kind of ape Marvel. Because again, they're making their displeasure known through the lettering here. Wonder Girl did nothing to help this guy. Like if I'm Speedy, I'm kind of thinking, where is Wonder Girl's heart? Because it's not with him. Anyway, Wonder Girl's saying she was worried. I wasn't worried enough to actually do anything, but I was kind of worried. And Speedy says that he's fine, but he mentions that Robin and, quote, Flasher have been taken somewhere, and we gotta find them. Again, the whole thing with Flasher, I don't understand that kind of slang. Well, it turns out there's kind of a fork in the road of where these two are traveling. So obviously they have to break up into teams again. Hawk again makes the decision on the team, and he picks Wonder Girl. And Hawk says, "Listen, why don't you take my brother, my younger brother, my wimpy brother? He's more like your speed, Speedy, and you can go with him." However, Speedy doesn't like this. Speedy doesn't like saying, "Listen, I've been standing there holding my dick once. I don't want to do it again. I gotta kind of like alpha up here. Listen, me beating up your brother, that hasn't taught you what a tough guy I am? Come on. So anyway, he kind of directly confronts Hawk for the first time. And again, this is going back, these guys sound like high school students. And again, this is sort of an attempt to kind of ape Marvel, because DC kind of stayed away from romances between the heroes for the most part. But they're trying to make it seem like kind of maybe Speedy has a thing for Wonder Girl, even though she clearly doesn't have a thing for him. And Speedy lashes out, and he gives him the first blow. And so for the first time, he actually does hit Hawk in this comic. Hawk is a little pissed off, but Speedy should be more pissed off, because Wonder Girl makes it clear that she's on Hawk's side. So, Wonder Girl's looking at Speedy and just saying, "Incel, I'm with Chad. You can go." And she says, "Listen, we got to catch, Robin and Flasher, And Hawk is saying, "Listen, you're outclassed here. This chick can beat you up. Hey, give it up. I'm not bad company." So the two teams are set up. Hawk and Wonder Girl and Speedy and the Dove. It turns out the head of the smuggling ring is monitoring both teams. So both teams are coming closer. As I mentioned, there was a fork in the road, so there's kind of two paths, and they're both taking these two paths. But these two paths, it turns out, lead to the same area, and that's the citadel of the smuggling ring. So they both break in. So really nothing was achieved by that. And again, Hawk and Dove and Speedy, they're going into action. It's a little bit of teamwork here, because they're saying, "Hey, can you provide me with a smoke screen?" And Speedy's like, "Yeah, just watch this arrow." The head of the smuggling ring, he's kind of breaking down here. He can't believe that his henchmen can't stand up to these superheroes, and he sees everything kind of crumbling in front of him. He's definitely not being controlled at this point. However, now he's being controlled, because we kind of see our puppet master, and it's kind of like this green alien type creature, and he's barking out orders on his his transmitter. He's calling the head of the smuggling ring, worthless errand boy. And he orders them to destroy the entire facility. He's saying, "Listen, if your guys can't handle this on the individual level, we're gonna have to change this from a macro fight to a." So anyway, he's saying, "Listen, you guys can't handle things. You clearly can't handle things on a micro level. So I'm gonna take this and put it on a macro level, and I'm just going to order you to destroy the entire facility." Really, it's been a bad experience with me. You guys have been bad puppets. If there's collateral damage, I'm fine with that. So anyway, the head of the smuggling ring, he does as he's ordered. He's about to pull a self-destruction switch. However, Dove immediately grabs him from behind. So he stops him from pulling that switch. Dove calls him Chubbins. So even though they're on opposite sides of justice, maybe Dove sees something in this older, refined gentleman who's head of a criminal enterprise. Then Hawk does something, I don't know what he's trying to do. It kind of looks like he's throwing a punch, but it also kind of looks like he's reaching for something, but there's nothing there. Again, this is not really a well laid out story. Speedy kind of he corners the head of the smuggling ring, and he grabs him by the collar, and he's saying, "Listen, Lumpy, you better start talking, or else I'm going to really start belting Dove." So it turns out that the head of the smuggling ring, he still has that kind of hypnotized look on his face. And he's immediately unhypnotized. He kind of looks like he's himself again. And he's kind of like the tough-talking Tony Soprano gangster you would expect someone like this to be. And then he immediately goes back to kind of the deer in the headlights look. So Wonder Girl is noticing that he's clearly under some type of mental influence, but the mental influence is somewhat selective. So it kind of it's like on and off. Now the two teams, the Teen Titans and Hawk and Dove, they're kind of at an impasse at this point, because the whole idea of Hawk and Dove being there was to stop the smuggling ring. The problem is that that's all they cared about, stopping this smuggling ring. So they did not look at, say, the bigger picture as the Teen Titans are doing. So the Teen Titans are saying, listen guys, it looks like, we still have some mop-up duty to do. We still got to find Robin and Kid Flash. We got to figure out what's going on with, who's controlling this. However, Hawk and Dove are like saying, listen, that's kind of out of our pay grade. Our mission was to stop the smuggling ring, and we did that. And our responsibilities are over at this point. And it kind of looks like the two are transforming back into their civilian identities. So, like I said, I didn't read any Hawk and Dove, but I kind of get the idea through osmosis that once their mission is done, they revert back to who they are. So there's sort of like a time limit on their heroics. So the two of them are transforming into their civilian identities. They don't want to be identified by the Teen Titans, by who they actually are. So they're just running out at this point. Speedy's trying to play the tough guy here, saying, oh man, gosh darn, my temper. My temper. Those guys must have been terrified of me, and it just drove them apart and just drove them away from us. And I think the other members of the Teen Titans are like, yeah, sure. Keep telling yourself that, Speedy. It's your temper. In fact, even Wonder Girl is saying, Speedy, don't. And I'm taking that as, Speedy, stop embarrassing yourself, okay? So anyway, they do have the henchmen tied up. So the smuggling ring is broken. However, they don't know what's going on with Robin or Kid Flash. Because again, the guys running the smuggling ring don't know. They were just hypnotized. Wonder Girl's pointing this out, that this guy, trying to be a tough guy and, kind of like a Jack Bauer interrogator isn't going to work with this guy. He doesn't know anything. He was hypnotized. And that, Wonder Girl's pointing out that, they're going to have to find their friends by themselves. And it turns out that the Puppet Master actually does have possession of Robin and Kid Flash. They're under some type of hypnosis here. And the Puppet Master here is being a little cryptic about what's going on. And then we go to the final panel, and it looks like they're going through a really bad LSD trip. Very psychedelic. This is definitely designed by Neil Adams. And we're told that the next issue is halfway to Holocaust. And that was that very strange issue. It's worth looking at just to see exactly early on what the people at DC thought Marvel was doing. Okay, so I'm going to take a look at the letters page. And it's to tell it to the Titans. Okay, it looks like Dick Giordano was the editor. So most of the letters are kind of like are addressed to him. The first letter is talking about, a statement that Dick had put in issue number 19, saying that they were going to sort of change the direction of the comic and that they're going to sort of develop the characters more. The letter says, thank you for doing that. I mean, it took them 19 issues to figure out, hey, we kind of need to develop these characters. Because the Teen Titans, the problem with the Teen Titans in part was they were derivative characters. Robin was a knockoff of Batman. Kid Flash was a knockoff of The Flash. Speedy was a knockoff of Green Arrow. And they had a couple of characters that weren't quite knockoffs, but they just didn't catch on. In fact, they do talk about one of them in this page. So anyway, one guy is happy to see that statement. I guess he's kind of one of these frustrated but patient fans. I noticed that when I reviewed the Ghost Rider issue, they had a ton of patient fans. That comic was around for about 7 years, and they still had readers saying, we're finally seeing the potential. Finally, after 7 years, we're seeing potential. The second letter is somewhat interesting in that it's talking about Beast Boy and saying really what a great character it is. And I always thought Beast Boy was created during the George Perez era, but it turns out, Beast Boy was an older character. And the letter is also mentioning the Doom Patrol, and that since the Doom Patrol is gone, then Beast Boy would really be a unique character because there's nothing like him. However, Dick Giordano, he kind of nixes the idea, and he just admits it. He says, "quote I'm not very fond of Beast Boy. Could be because I have this thing about weirdo type superheroes." So Beast Boy is not going to show up, in part because Dick Giordano didn't like him. The next letter is kind of interesting. She's saying, listen, how can Wonder Girl be in another derivative? How can Wonder Girl be in the Teen Titans when her adult version is in the Justice League and they both operate in the same timeline in the same universe? And the editors here, being a little condescending, are saying that Wonder Girl and Wonder Woman are two different characters. So that's how they can coexist. And another is just simply pointing out a mistake in the art, and the editors are agreeing, saying, yeah, we made a mistake. You have a good eye. Another in-house ad is for the Phantom Stranger, the first issue. I always enjoyed Phantom Stranger covers, but the difference between this cover and the ones I enjoyed was the Phantom Stranger was always an observer in the covers that I enjoyed. Whereas it kind of looks like here the Phantom Stranger is more actively involved in the ongoings here. So I never liked those. I always liked those covers where he's just watching things, like Rod Sterling, but not actually involved. See an ad for an early record club. This is around the time record clubs were starting. It's not really a very particularly good ad. It's just interesting because it's early. They're also selling tape cartridges. And the last is kind of this Aurora model set of some of the great Universal monster heroes. Beautiful color, I have to say. So that's it. And that is my review of Teen Titans, issue number 21. And I hope to have more reviews up soon. Bye.